G'day everyone, Brennan Anthony back with you. Another video log regarding my book, Music Production Cultures, Perspectives on Popular Music Pedagogy. Today I want to discuss some elements from Chapter 1. Chapter 1 unpacks the skills and some creative practices that are discussed throughout the book in the pedagogy. And before I do that, though, I think it's really important that if we're trying to develop a practice or an international way or understanding of how do we go about facilitating education in popular music production in a similar way so that there's uniformity across the globe, so that we're helping inform each other's pedagogy from the things we're finding, we need to understand that our pedagogy has to instill a holistic understanding of production to our students. So my book suggests that the best way to achieve an education in popular music production is not helping students to manifest great sounding music. That will happen as a course of action. Students may or may not create high quality music when they're at university studying with us. But for me, if they do, that's a bonus. That's something they'll go on to do. Education doesn't become realized when the students make a great piece of music. A great piece of music is a moment in time and it's gone. But that process is important. So what I like to suggest that our role as educators is to develop the students' holistic understanding of the greater practice of music production. What does music production involve on many levels? Social, musical, technical, creative, etc. And if the student understands that greater practice of production, what is involved as a music producer? What is my role? How can that be fluid? How do I need to adapt that? Then once they understand the elements that are associated with music production, we can help them go, okay, now that I understand what's involved there, how do I nuance my knowledge of music production to my practice as a music producer? I believe that we need to take that greater understanding and then nuance students' abilities in making music, the music they want to make, the processes they want to engage with. And they'll develop that and diversify that over time. It's so important that students start thinking for themselves whilst at university, so that when they get out and they're on their own, they're used to thinking for themselves. But to do that, if we can develop an understanding of the greater practice of popular music production, that really helps them. Okay, and I think it's really important also to understand that greater practice of popular music production involves what has traditionally been called both sides of the glass. The people, and I'm always going to do it this way, the people making the music, the musicians, and the people operating the technology. I think for too long in higher education and in society, we've seen music production as in the control room, because there's been this figure. Chris Thomas is a great music producer. He works in the control room and he records bands. He's a producer. Well, that's not the archetype of producers these days. Music production, even with Chris Thomas, I work with Chris Thomas, I've seen him work, and the one thing he does is he puts great people in the positions to make the music. The musicians and the relationship between the musicians, the music, the performance, the engineer, the producer, it's a culture. It's all interrelated. So our education must highlight the integral links between both sides of the glass, the musicians, the performance, the song, and the production team. Or perhaps the musicians and the songwriters are the production team. And that's where much of our pedagogy has to be, it needs to evolve to accommodate modern processes. So if you go to page 3 of my book, you'll see my lovely little music productions cultures diagram. And today I want to discuss with you that little center figure and a little bit of the outside figure there, the skills. So I think it's really important for us, if we're going to develop that foundation, understanding of the holistic greater practice of production, I like to do it in 3 levels: skills, creative practice, and then the more cultural considerations. That's what that diagram is. And skills for me, I attack them early on with students at higher education. So let's just kind of go through the skills. I think one of the greatest skills that is left out of the conversation very often is songwriting. Without a great song, I don't care how good you can produce it, it's still going to be crap if it's a crap song. There's no amount of fixing unless you turn it into an instrumental and change it up, whatever. So songwriting is a skill, and that doesn't mean all music producers need to be songwriters, but they need an understanding of songwriting. I talked to a wonderful colleague of mine, Prince Charles Alexander from Berkeley, and he suggested it's a great term he uses. It was something I do normally anyway, but I hadn't given it a term, and he calls it song fixing. So he helps students understand how to fix songs. Now that's an understanding of song, meaning structure, arrangement, lyrics, the length, the BPM, the tempo, the arrangement, the instrumentation, the lyrical messaging. That's an understanding of songwriting as opposed to being a songwriter. So that's an important skill that we need to develop our students' abilities, whether they're songwriters or an understanding of the practice of songwriting and song fixing. Critical listening is another skill, I think, which is really important. And there's been a lot of research in critical listening, and in the majority, it focuses on solfege and frequencies and that recognition, and the sound box, the square that we listen to, dimensions, top to bottom, frequency response, left to right panning, depth and spatiality, out of phase information. I also like to think of critical listening as dynamics over time. So when you produce a song, what's the song doing dynamically? That's critical listening. Critical listening also is massively informed by musicality and performance. For too long, students come and go, oh, I need to hear EQ, I need to do compression, I need to put effects. I'm going, yeah, but what about the performance? Too many of my music technology students are so focused on the gear and twiddling knobs that they don't listen to the music. They can't critique performance. Without that and the skills to communicate to the performer, they'll be lost as musicians. So we need to develop critical listening on multiple levels: musicality, performance, sonics, the soundbox. And also, I like to engage my students. This is where musicality and performance as a skill. So musicality and performance is a skill of music production, being able to perform, having that musicianship to perform. Also, another skill is to be able to engage with emotion whilst producing music, whilst performing music. What am I feeling as I'm listening to this? What do I need to get the singer to think about in their mindset cognitively so that they'll deliver a performance that delivers the energy and the emotion for the listener to connect? That's a skill of music production, a very difficult one to get 18 to 21-year-olds to engage with, but they understand the importance of it as we go on. Music programming is a massive skill now. DAW skills using Ableton, Logic, Pro Tools, Reaper, whatever, the ability to program music. Majority of music these days in Billboard Top 100 uses music programming in some form. So it's a skill. The problem with music programming is that most electronic DJs and programmers that I meet at uni are very stuck in their ways. They sit at home in their little silos of music making and they make their same music, and they're really good at it, but they're very one-dimensional. This is the kind of music that they make. So I like to bring music programmers and get them to go and write some rap tunes, and then get them with some heavy metal guys and maybe program some proggy kind of alternate stuff up and get them outside of the comfort box. But music programming is a definite skill that we need to develop with our students. One of the greatest skills as a music producer is your communication and psychological abilities. How, when you hear something, you're listening critically, am I feeling an emotion? No, I'm not quite getting it yet. So it's not what you say to a person, it's how you say it to a person. So if a singer was in there singing this song and it's about the loss of a loved one or something like that, and I wasn't feeling the emotion, a young, intrepid sound engineer who doesn't know how to communicate may say, well, what do you think of that one? And the song was like, and they're going, well, I don't really know. I really want feedback. I'm not too sure. And or the sound engineer could say, oh, the verse was a bit out of tune. The chorus, it sounded okay. It was a little laggy. That's not helping. Communication in the music studio is about developing performances, getting on with people, making a culture which is either happy, fun, angry, party, whatever, to suit the culture of the music making. So perhaps with that singer, you could say, tell me about the person you're singing about. So instead of critiquing the performance, I tell my students, engage in a conversation with this person about the song's message. Tell me about the person you're singing about. And you notice my energy just changed. And so I talk to my students about energy, about what I bring to the studio, and my energy will change and develop and adapt as a producer depending on who I'm working with and what I'm working on. And so I help them develop communication strategies. I talked to Toby Say from Philadelphia, Drexel University. Hi, Toby. About some, I often take students on my wing and we press the talk back button. And before we do, I go, okay, now listen to what I'm going to say to them, and I'll say something like that. And then I'll take the top back off and I say, okay, now next time you have a go. And you can see them go, oh shit, what am I going to say? And they'll try and they stumble at it. Simon Zagorski Thomas and I talked about this. It's like students come in young, they're socially young, 18-year-olds, whatever. And they go, oh yeah, I get it. There's a person there. I've got to talk to them. But they suck at it because they haven't been doing it for as long as you and I've been doing it all. They've been at school where they've been taught and talked at. They're used to that. And so passively, I try and develop students' understanding of I need to talk and communicate with people. And how do I do that? I just talk to them. I just exemplify the process. I just become friends with them, professional friends with them as their educator. I get down on their level. I talk about the music. I get them to tell me stuff. And then by doing that, we kind of start generating this relationship where they learn it's okay to start talking to people and putting yourself out there. It's okay. It's about mentorship. So yeah, that communication and engagement with emotional transference when you're listening and engaging with emotion when performing is so important. And finally, sound engineering, obviously. Sound engineering, microphones, preamps, EQs, compression, effects, etc. So they're like the skills. Now, I developed those skills in first and second year with my students. Engagement projects, you get them to collaborate together, to learn together. People who are good music programmers work with singer-songwriters and sound engineers, and they kind of learn holistically about the practice that they're not good at by working with these people. So not everyone becomes a skilled sound engineer, but everyone garnishes an understanding of sound engineering. Not everyone becomes a great songwriter, but everyone starts to understand songwriting by working with songwriters. So I bring music technology, popular music students, jazz students, whoever, into the same classroom so that they learn the affordances of others and develop an understanding of the practices that they're not particularly good at by working with these people. So then as they move on, they can communicate in those realms. If we go, hey, here's our sound engineering guys, let's do mixing here, but we don't involve the musician's input on the song and the aesthetics and what the musicians are hearing, we are wasting our time here. We're developing mixers who will only mix for themselves and who will never please clients in the industry. Because if you don't listen to the artist about what they want in the mix and what they're hearing in the mix, they're never going to hire you again. So we have to engage them in that understanding and that communicative culture together. So these skills can also kind of be segregated into hard skills and soft skills. A good mate of mine, Adam Bell from Canada, has written on these terms, hard skills and soft skills. Hard skills are things you do, things you can learn to do. He describes learning to paddle a canoe. How you paddle is a hard skill. How you EQ, how you use a preamp, how you put a microphone on an instrument, the hard skills. Soft skills are more interpersonal. How do we think about things? How do we communicate what we're feeling? How do we traverse socio-musical situations and the decisions we make? Soft skills. My doctorate found irrecoverably that students value more so the acquisition of soft skills than hard skills. Research has gone on further from the findings of my doctorate. My doctorate informed some research that has taken that even further. And so these soft skills, I think, are the things that we also do need to target. It's easy to target the hard skills. It's easy to teach students how to engineer and put mics and how to program a DAW, perhaps even how to write a song. But what about why, and what about, and for what purpose? And how do you negotiate the songwriting, production, collaborative process, your communication? What emotions are you feeling? How do you express that? How do you traverse these situations? There's soft skills that are so important to music making that we have to include in our pedagogy, or we're not giving the students what is going to be useful for them to have longevity as a musician later on in life. I see far too many graduates from university and music production related students who I just know will not have a career as musicians because they have very limited soft skills, and the educators are as much to blame, in my opinion, as the students in many cases, because the educators haven't been actioning those soft skills in students or passively targeting them within their studies. It's an enriching experience. We need to target those things, as well as teach them how to twiddle all the knobs. The second layer of my book, on page 3, is a thing called the creative practice we use. So we've got the skills, and these skills will be nuanced to the music that you are making. So hip hop and EDM will have more programming. Acoustic jazz ensembles will have more performativity with instruments, etc., etc., etc. But then we have a decision to make on creative practice. So the students will learn the skills. But then we go, okay, well, how do we apply those skills in a certain creative practice? Now, creative practice is how do we go about doing something and why? Now, creative practice in the studio, I'll give you an example. Let's say we're doing a guitar solo over a piece of music. Now, in one instance, it could be a guitar solo where the musician, the musicality and performance is improvised, and every take is different. So I'm dropping in from the beginning of the track to the end, and the guitarist is just playing improvised stuff over the song from go to woe. That's a creative practice. In alternate to that, the guitarist may be playing structured licks, and that I can drop in individual licks because they're all the same. And by dropping in, instead of using a linear go-to-woe performance, there's a very different creative practice there. You can use playlists where you could just do linear and then you can join playlists together. That's a different creative practice. You can use tape. I do a project with my students where we do the Les Paul overdubbing technique. We have a tape machine with 2 tracks. We record the Beatles come together, and we record the drums, the bass, and the rhythm guitars and the rhythm keys all in once. Then we bounce that track over to another track, and so that's all mixed live by the engineers, and then we bounce that over to the second track, and the students sing the lead vocal, they do the double tracking, they sing the harmonies, they do the solo, then we bounce it back to another track, and we don't use Pro Tools at all. We use an analog tape machine. The students hear how the creative practice that we use shapes the sound of the music that we make. Now, that doesn't mean students should go and do Les Paul overdubbing, but they get it. They go, oh, the way I make music influences the way my music sounds. Creative practice. And so in second year, I get my students to engage with a lot of different creative practice scenarios: live recording, overdubbing, electronic music, hybrid, online recording, online production techniques, uploading file transfers, using master sessions, sending stems out, etc., etc. Different creative practices. And then I get them to critically reflect on how that influenced the music making. If students work this way, they work out an important thing I'm going to say once and say it very quickly. The influence that technology has on the music that we make. Now, that sentence I just said has been overutilized, overeducated, over-researched, in my opinion, and by way of all of that, become like this guiding light of music production education. And I don't think it should be. I think it's very important, but it's just one little piece in the puzzle. But it's important that students understand. So students today are using lots of different technology. As a producer, I used to use SSL consoles for mixing, Neve consoles for tracking. I'd use Pro Tools, and I'm now currently using Ableton. So I kind of stick to certain things. These guys are changing software. They're changing gear. They're booking different things. They're using all this different technology, and so they should, because the technology they use shapes the music they make, and they make. And the genres now are so blurred that they're coming in and out of all these different genres. Okay, the third layer on my music production is the cultural influences, and I'm going to get into them a little bit further. I want to leave this vlog here now. I think that's heaps of information from chapter 1 of the book. I want to thank you for having a listen. If you enjoy the chat with you, please whack a little comment in there. Just all you got to do is sign up to the website. Don't worry, you won't get any spam. Whack a little question in there. Love to generate some discussions on the topics here. Get out there and have a read of the book. Happy to answer any questions. Looking forward to developments on this to help bring all of our education into synergy, or at least an understanding of what's going on. Look after yourselves. Talk to you soon.